this topic really did get me thinking. Now, stepping back off the soapbox about, what's the impact on the whole body of human knowledge and on our ability to think? And we've talked about this before. So
No, yeah, no, we most definitely have, and there are certainly, I think, broader implications on this, and it warrants deeper discussion, and certainly an awareness that it's potential for happening, certainly in any kind of organization. You and I have been through, and I think we're still learning the impact of the artificial intelligence just on human nature in general, how organizations are going to adjust and work, how it's going to affect their operations and their people and everything else. And we're only at the very beginning of the long cycle. Like
oh
we're
yeah,
still seeing impacts of cell phones on people, and the cell phones have been around for decades. And the
that
same for the internet.
yeah.
It just takes a long time for some of these things to work through. Um,
That's actually a great point. I mean, this year in New York State for this school year that started this week is the first time that the governor has ordered I think they're calling it the bell-to-bell cell phone ban, which is saying that classrooms across the state are, you know, supposed to be forbidding students having their cell phones out. And, you know, smartphones have been around since I think 2007 was the launch of the first iPhone. So we've been,
yeah.
we're getting close to 20 years, like 18 years of iPhones, and we still don't fully understand the impact that they have on people. So it's going to be a long time before anyone has a definitive answer on AI. But before I ask you if you agree with the article, sum up for us the premise. Like, what is the argument that they're making, or the questions they're raising in the article?
Well, the questions are, well, they're raising a bunch of questions. I think the main question is, just can sum it up quite succinctly, is are we really getting lazy? Are we not creating knowledge anymore because we're relying on these extremely powerful tools to answer questions for us? Whereas in the past, we would have done a lot of research, and the internet made, doing research a lot easier. You can look at, tons of links and sites and sources very quickly. Now it's summarizing all that for us and giving us the answer. So we're never really generating our own knowledge anymore. We're just kind of relying on an LM to summarize it and tell us the output. And
Yeah.
LLMs don't necessarily create new knowledge. There is some of the knowledge that they were trained with.
So I think that's a really interesting point, that LLMs, as you just said, they're synthesizing and aggregating existing knowledge. And I think the premise is that humans, when they're doing research, we have an incentive to do something different. We historically, at least, we value ingenuity and novel ideas, right? So
Hmm.
humans are like,
Right.
there's always going to be places where humans just do research, and fair enough. And I guess you could argue that doing straight research isn't adding to the body of human knowledge. But have been a lot of situations in which a researcher is just looking for that, I don't know, that out there idea, that different idea. You hear all the time of people trying to solve these unsolvable problems or pondering the imponderables. And I guess sometimes that's the spark of human creativity, that we're like struggling to make sense of something, and we're trying to piece together these unlikely connections that have never been made before between different ideas or different topics. Is that sort of the thing that we're talking about here?
Yeah, no, absolutely. That's 100% what we're talking about. But I want to be careful too, because you and I have also taken the view that these tools can be used to enhance creativity. Tilly is an AI generated actress.
Okay.
She is remarkably lifelike. If you look at the images of her in short videos, she's remarkably lifelike.
Okay.
Is it perfect? No. I think if you look, you can tell, obviously. Still, with AI generated videos and images, you can still tell that they're generated. They're not perfect yet. They're close.
Okay.
And I think the rate of change is actually quite significant compared to a year and a half ago. So it's amazing. But the whole point is, and a number of actors and actresses were up in arms about this because they immediately saw them getting replaced. Consequently, the unions were also up in arms about this. Everybody was up in arms about this. Mind you, it's not real yet. Question is, will it ever be real? And I think it really comes back to how do they make money off of this at the end of the day? But it's not their likeness, so I don't really know how you can do that. It's purely a generated image from probably a billion images. So it's representative of no one artist. And I think they were, concerned, and probably rightly so, and probably not anytime soon, that movies will be replaced by AI-generated actors and actresses. One of the retorts I heard was, well, they're not human, they can't represent human emotions. Fair. Okay, that's fine. That's what actors and actresses, should do particularly well. I can argue that most don't do particularly well. And again, I think that's something you could program into any model because you're just representing an emotion physically through, movement in the face or whatever. But they are completely up in arms about it. It's quite amusing.
So
I mean, it's just a point to talk about. I think it's
no, it's fascinating. Like, why now? Like, we've seen AI generated characters in video for a couple of years. Is it just because Tilly is a better version
I
and it's
think,
more realistic, and people are now saying,
yeah,
"Oh, this is on my doorstep"?
I think you're seeing the quality get to the point where it is hyper realistic. It's incredibly
Okay,
real. And, you can see some of the movies out there, even if they're stitched together as small pieces, looking incredibly realistic.
right.
They look great. I mean, look, watch TV for any length of time. You're going to see there's a whole bunch of advertisements out there that you can tell that are AI generated.
So does Tilly look like anybody famous?
No, she's a composite of, I'm sure, a million different people that brought together.
Generic Western ideal of
Yeah,
a
exactly.
young actress or something.
Exactly.
Okay,
That's it.
all right.
It didn't fit any one particular actress. I mean, yeah, I'm sure some actors can see themselves in it, but the reality is it's not the case. It's purely generative AI created. And then of course the content arguments take place and how they're going to get compensated and how to protect their jobs. And
Is Tilly working? Like, has
no,
anyone hired
nobody's
Tilly, or is this just a tech
nobody's.
demo?
This was a tech demo that some studio put together. Nobody's hired her. I think some what do you call it? Some people have reached out to try and represent her, which I found quite interesting, but none of that's occurred yet.
So, I mean, I guess it does sound like a Tempest and Teapot, because
100%.
at the end of the day, Tilly's just another AI generated video avatar, maybe
Right.
better than the ones before her, but she's not really an actor if she's not acting. She's just someone's proof of concept, or
Exactly. But let me ask a question.
attention grab on the internet or whatever.
Look, it's a great attention grab. You know as well
Yeah.
as I do, these things eventually do come to fruition.
Right.
So, the question is ultimately, let's fast forward a year or two from now, if it's even that long, and you can, in fact, generate feature-length movies using artificial intelligence. Given that you and I think, both believe that the advent of these tools is going to increase the amount of work that can get done, that over time, you're still going to need to backfill those jobs, and you're still going to require the Bs and the Cs in the door. And given that the agents and the tools have gotten so sophisticated, you can take a B player and you can make them in many ways, I wouldn't say be an A player, but they can certainly take on the qualities of an A software developer.
Okay.
So
All right.
that's my
I think
thought.
I'll
Maybe
buy
I'm
that.
wrong. Don't know.
No, I think I'm willing to buy that. But it's maybe one thing we'll see though is, where will those, say, B grade software developers who, get amplified into an A because they're using AI, where will they work? Will they work
Right.
in an IT department, or will they be the citizen developers working in a business organization of tomorrow?
Right. Right.
That's the other interesting question.
No, I think that's a fair point. You're absolutely correct. And I mean, the interesting thing, though, is the article. This is not cutting across just software development. It's cutting across, I think, a wider swath of individual jobs that are out there. And what is the broader impact going to be? Certainly in the short term for those that are coming out of universities, and what do they do? And it's like when I'm asked, from a college grad, what do I do? I'm like, always diversify your experience, diversify what you're learning. Don't focus on one thing. I mean, that's going to give you some longevity. But I actually don't really have a lot of great answers, and I think it's remains to be seen what this is all going to turn into.
It's going to come full circle. The most valuable, and I say this only quasi tongue in cheek, the most valuable major might turn out to be philosophers. In other words,
kidding aside,
that's the one thing that humans still do currently, at least, that
right.
AI is not able to do. Right? We think creatively, constructively. We ponder the meaning of life around us, etc. Maybe the path forward for students will be to be a little bit of a philosopher, be a generalist in some way, with broad knowledge and the ability to link ideas.
Right. Well, so you bring up an incredible, I think, valid point, where most curriculums these days, and even back when I took my engineering curriculum and science curriculum, I took very little in the way of liberal arts. Now, naturally, I read a lot. I read a lot of anyway, so I've self-taught a lot of different things that I didn't learn in school, including philosophy, and I read lots of literature. I was always keen on diversifying my background, but that's not taught in college inherently. They don't. Most curriculums don't capture that. They don't cover liberal arts, and liberal arts, I think, programs for years have just been not, I don't say not well invested in, but it's not part of a core engineer. And I really think now more so than ever, that is incredibly important to have that included, given these tools are so communications driven and English driven, and you need the capability to communicate and think well, that augmenting a engineering major with those skills is really important. What do you think? And
Isn't it
you're
ironic
more of a
that,
liberal arts major than I am.
sorry, isn't it ironic though that the people who are least equipped to communicate with AI models these days might be the people who actually spent their whole careers preparing to be software engineers?
It's funny, actually. I know. It comes full circle.
Yep.
Who knows what his journey is going to lead us? It's going to be interesting.
Let me ask a different question. What do you think this means for teachers? Loaded question there. Because I don't want,
Yeah, I don't even know what it means for teachers. What I do know is this. What it means for teachers is teachers have to master this stuff too. Because if a teacher, and look, in 2025, for a teacher to say, no AI should be used at all in my course, I can forgive that. I don't think it's the best long-term strategy,
No.
but this is changing rapidly enough. It's new enough. I'm okay with it.
Right.
In 2020, fast forward a year, in late 2026, if a teacher says no AI whatsoever, I would consider that to be a very poorly informed stance.
Yes, I agree.
So I think teachers need to, I hate to say this because I don't want to add to their workload, but they need to understand this, and they need to give their students guidance on what is an appropriate and beneficial way for a student to use AI versus what is a lazy and ultimately harmful way to use it.
And you think they need to teach the students maybe a different set of skills to get the maximum value out of this?
You know, I had an English teacher in high school, junior high school, actually, Mr. Stoller, one of my favorite teachers. And he was known as a stickler, a hard grader.
Yep.
And he was very challenging. But one of the things he did was he forced us to learn soup to nuts the entire research paper process.
Right.
We had to turn in every 2 days, we had to turn in our index cards with our bibliography cards and our note cards and everything. But what I realized, it was an English course, but what he actually taught us was how to do research.
But
it was so valuable.
And I feel like that skill's fallen away
Yeah.
in the current generation. I feel like now, mostly we're teaching facts and teaching to the test and not teaching fundamental thinking skills.
Right.
And I know we're going off on the little bit of philosophy on me,
topics.
but these are important topics. And I guess the question is, now that you have this powerful tool that can really augment you as a teacher, how do you use it to get the most out of it?
Right.
How do you help your students learn even more faster? And since, if you're teaching 30 kids or 20 kids, you can't personalize it for each individual, but now you can.
Yeah, that's true. And in fact, I think if I were a teacher, and easy to say because I'm not, so I can't possibly understand all the challenges and constraints they have, but I can see how powerful it would be to basically tell a classroom full of kids, hey, here's the base information you all need to have, but each of you will be curious about, will have your attention piqued by a different aspect of this, so go dive into it. Use AI to go learn it, and then come back and tell us, like, what did you dive into? What did you learn more about than the baseline material that we shared? So here's the question number one. Is AI a bubble that's about to burst? So you and I can talk about this.
Let's go through this.
And this is timely because we're still hearing a lot in the news about an AI bubble.
Yeah, no, this is all over the news. And I do not think it's going to burst. I think we are through a transitionary period, which is very timely, but I definitely don't think it's about to burst. Contrary to what every journalist on the planet seems to think, because, if it bleeds, it leads, and bad news is good news in the world of journalism. But I really don't think it's about to burst, all kidding aside. I do think we're going through a transitionary period. I think we've invested massive amounts of money in its build out for data centers, obviously. We've spent a lot of money in training a lot of these foundation models. At some point, we're really going to run out of information to train those models with. And a lot of that money has been spent on we'll call it the pre-training part of the model creation process. We're going to move into a completely different phase. And that phase, I think, will be inference largely, and actual use of those models in a way that is much different than they're being used today. We're going to move from what I call it the, personal productivity tool to deeply embedded in organizations. And that compute is all going to be used, and all that investment's going to be used. And I think that's when you're going to start seeing a real massive return on this investment.
So that's interesting, because one of the things that I read the other day, someone was saying that their conjecture was that there literally were more data centers being built, that there aren't enough people. If every man, woman, and child in the United States had a $20 a month subscription to an AI model,
Right.
that still wouldn't be enough people to pay for all these data centers being built. Like, what's your take on that? Is it come down to this embedded AI concept that will make that suddenly be a good investment?
I think, well, look, we know AI is ultimately going to be permeating part of every single application, every part of our lives, I think, at some point. And I'm not, not it's not hyperbole. I really, truly think it's going to be a part of every single application that we use on a regular basis. So, no, I don't think that data center space is going to be a waste of money. I think it will be used. It's funny because it kind of reminds me back to those days when they had built out all this fiber across the entire planet. They spent an enormous amount of money on fiber optic cable. And, for years we've heard about, well, the fiber's dark, it's not being used. The fiber's dark, it's not being used. And, seemingly overnight, they couldn't start building it fast enough again because all that quote unquote dark fiber was now being used and they needed a lot more fiber. Again, it's hard to predict what the future is going to be clearly, but if I'm about to look out in the future, so little of AI is being used right now, and so few individuals or so few companies are genuinely really using it, that once they start really using it, I think you're going to see the opposite occur. They're going to need more electric, more capacity, more data centers. I can't see how it goes any other way.
Now, the interesting part for me, though, is that the definition of a bubble is sometimes simply expectations versus reality, right?
Right.
So I do worry that there is this overinflated set of expectations among sort of the general populace, right? That AI is going to magically change the world, and it's not going to take any effort. It's just going to put an easy button on everything they do, right? And we see that with people who, use AI to generate their work, and they don't put in the effort to actually use it appropriately.
Right.
What happens when those people become disillusioned? Like, is that a little bit of a bubble? Maybe not a strictly economic bubble, but an expectations bubble that we could see.
I think you're starting to see the beginnings of an expectations bubble now burst a little bit. I think genuinely, especially most organizations, they had this perspective or this perception that it was magic, and we'll give people ChatGPT and Claude, and all of a sudden great things are going to occur. And we realize, and you and I have been saying this literally for the better part of 2 years, that is not the case. That maybe will burst a little bit, but I think population and corporations in general are getting better educated in the capabilities, starting to understand the limitations of the current model, thinking about things a little bit differently. Now, this is going to be a journey. It's not going to happen overnight. And I think once that starts to occur, those that maybe had a bit of trepidation, or those where the perception bubble bursts and they really start to truly understand the capabilities, you're going to see an uptick, a dramatic uptick. I can't see it going any other way.
Yeah, I see at a human level, you've got humans who are slowly coming to terms with the fact that this is not a magic easy button. It's actually a tool that requires effort and skill to use effectively. I think that corporations, many of them, most of them maybe, are lagging behind. Like, they're still rolling this out as a tool to people. Right. But they're not yet broadly grasping the idea of embedding it into business processes.
No, not even close. You and I have spoken about this 100 times. We could probably do a whole podcast on it. I think first, a lot of the companies sold them these tools that magic was going to occur. And you and I looked at it and roll our eyes and go, there's no way. I think the other issue out there is, and you can argue with us all you want, feel free. Most companies, the CEO is putting AI under the CIO, the Chief Information Officer. And I think that is a real fundamental mistake. It doesn't belong there. And I think that's a big issue as well. And as an engineer and technologist for decades, I can say this is not the type of tool you put under technologists. It just doesn't belong there. There's a whole aspect of rolling this out, understanding deep business processes, that is far more critical. And I would argue that this needs to be broken out of IT, and it's probably a cross-functional type of role in the first place that honestly reports up to the CEO.
But it sounds like also you're saying, though, as business really figures out how to use this tool more effectively, we will see a whole new set of demand unlocked 100%. That doesn't exist yet.
Absolutely. I think that's just a matter of time.
I read an interesting article the other day. I believe it was in the New York Times, and it was precisely about this. There was an educator, and I forget where it was, but they're basically banning their students from using artificial intelligence and AI, and they're even forcing them to use the traditional old-style blue books for doing tests because they don't want them to do anything else. They want them to actually sit and write. And I think the concern was I think there were a lot of different concerns. I mean, I think it's happening so fast. They really don't know how to control it. So their knee-jerk reaction to controlling it is say, just don't do it right now, rather than embracing it and pulling it into the curriculum. But I think more fundamental, and it was more than literacy and use and understanding how to use artificial intelligence and becoming very literate using it. It was, I think in some cases, they genuinely felt like students were losing the ability to think. Like those real hardcore critical thinking skills which come up through a classics-based education or even STEM-based education, to question what you see, ask the right questions, things that you learn from literature, things that you learn from, other types of learning, that they were no longer getting that. And that was a big fear. And they wanted to basically instill those skills back into their students to get the most out of, I think, AI.
Absolutely. And it reminds me of what we were talking about earlier with AI and applying to the disciplines. And I think for the purposes of ensuring that students do have those critical thinking skills, I don't think that the old school methods are a bad idea to install, if that makes sense. But you have to do both, right? You have to make
Right.
sure that students have those
Yes.
critical thinking skills, that they understand, that they know how to write. And unfortunately, with the pandemic, as well as the advent of smartphones, even before AI, these skills were going down. And I can tell
I
you
know.
that because of my purview of supporting students and families. So my first business started in 2014. So this was when smartphones were kind of not new, but they weren't necessarily as ubiquitous by kids and teens. And as time went on, it became very clear to me that the students were losing. I mean, they weren't the same students, but as a whole, they were losing maturity. They were losing those critical thinking skills. They were losing that ability to reflect. They were losing that ability to write. So unfortunately, this was already happening. So then when you have AI like a shortcut coming in, it's just too tempting for them not to use it because they haven't even developed these skills in the first place. So I definitely think, I mean, that's a whole other discussion, but I think that like smartphones are, really, there's a whole body of work around this, but like smartphones really don't belong in schools. And it's only relatively recently that that there's been a push to get them out of the schools because they are depleting student learning. I'm talking about K-12 specifically, but this could also apply to higher ed, right? So I think that the old school methods, in summary, are a good idea. And as long as you also are not just doing that to avoid AI, that you also have those AI building
Well,
skills.
you have to embrace it. Well, I think it has to be part of anything. Look, the tool's not going away, much like smartphones. You can't ban it outright. I do think they need to be taught how to integrate it properly, like you had said, into the learning process, because it can be a force multiplier if done the right way, but not at the expense of core critical skills that are being lost for a whole slew of reasons. I just feel like the AI tools make it go faster.
And I just have to jump in on the smartphone thing and say I'm proud to say that in New York State, where I'm a resident, we actually have, as of this school year, there's a statewide ban on smartphones in schools in K through 12, and it is remarkable the impact it's had already. In fact, I saw a headline this morning that said cafeterias are noisy again at school. Basically saying that students are actually talking to each other and you can hear the difference. You can hear them actually interacting, whereas before they were probably, holding a smartphone and eating a sandwich or a salad and not interacting as much. So I think it's a good thing.
Let me ask you a question. So what do you think is the lowest human emotion?
The lowest human emotion? Oh God, I have no idea. Can't even think of anything. Fear? No.
Close. So and this was something new to me, and I said, the lowest human emotion is, and I thought it was fear, and I said anger when I first somebody asked me this question. I thought it was anger. The lowest human emotion is actually apathy.
I would have not even thought that. That would have never.
And it's interesting. So if you look at concentration camps, or if you look at those where situations are very dire,
right?
When people were tortured and everything like that, at the end of the day, the lowest low was when they had no reaction.
Yeah.
It is apathy. They don't have fear. They don't have anger. It's apathy. Right. And what I tell people is that AI operates at apathy. It has no emotion. So when you look at AI, it's apathetic. It really is unemotional, right?
Right.
And so as a human, when let's say I got a mammogram, just instinctually, I don't want a apathetic system to be giving me
No,
a
right.
diagnosis, because there is no emotion
There's
there.
nothing there.
For people to develop that trust, you know what I'm saying?
And it's
so-
interesting because that apathy is simultaneously, I'm guessing, both the greatest strength and weakness of these systems, right? Like they are not subject to the vagaries of human emotion-driven decisions and biases, but yet they also can't account for human needs and nuance.
Even though like AI could read, as let's say, a scan perfectly,
Right.
it's interesting when you take a poll, people actually still will prefer
A human.
that is imperfect,
Right.
because they have that emotion, because they feel like somebody still cares. Those scans is a set of eyes that does care, rather than just having apathy, you know? The line in there is like, I love your perfect imperfections, you know? And
Right.
it's sort of like that, right? Like where you actually want that imperfection.
You want a
to some
human at
degree.
the end
You
of
want
the
a
day.
human.
You want a human. Is that emotional connection
Yeah.
that you want.
Cast your mind back a year to the beginning of
Right.
2025. At the end of 2025, have you seen any changes in the way that executives and business leaders are talking about or thinking about AI?
Yeah, I think we've gone through a bit of a hype cycle here. In the beginning of the year, I would say it was unbridled enthusiasm. It was, let's give everybody ChatGPT or Claude or Gemini or whatever it was. And I think probably 3/4 of the way through the year, they started to realize that this is hard, and ROI that they were looking for or promised is not there yet. And in fact, in many cases, it was probably negative ROI because of things like work slop.
Right.
And I think that's the change, but that's a normal change, I think, when you go through the hype cycle. People have to reorient themselves around reality and not all this information that they have.
So some of them are maybe finding themselves in the trough of disillusionment before they can climb back out of it.
And realizing all the things that they don't know that they need to know to actually get the maximum value out of all of this. Because there are examples of companies that got a lot of value out of it.
Right, right. I think for me, the biggest thing I saw is, especially when you and I have been out talking to customers and clients, is a shift from very early in 2025. It was still a question about, should we do this or should we do this now? Are we ready to embark on an AI journey? Is it right for my company? Should I do this now or should I wait longer?
Right, yes.
It was an open question. I think by about the third quarter of the year, I wasn't hearing that question anymore. I was hearing much more, how do we do this, right?
Yes.
And the how was like, going back to what you said, the fact that there are a number of failures out there, or maybe not abject failures, but companies reporting they didn't get as much return as they thought they would. Questions like, okay, I know I need to do this, but how? What do I do? How do I start? Where do I go?
Right. I think you're starting to see that now. And look, it's indicative of the past too. People get knowledge. They understand what they don't know. They now have to develop a plan to really incorporate the tech into the business, train their employees, maximize the value. I still think it's going to be a minimum of a decade-long transformation. And you and I were talking today about all the qualities that I think some of these orgs need. It's going to take a long time.
Yeah.
They're not set up for it.
Right. I think you're right. Well, the other thing that happened in 2025 was clearly AI broke out of the laboratory.
Yes.
And it sounds like I'm describing Jurassic Park or something, right? Like someone had these like little cloned cute dinosaur babies in the laboratory, and now they're rampaging
over the
across the
place.
world. But AI has clearly broken out of the laboratory. It's in the public consciousness. It's popping up
Everywhere.
It's in pop culture. It's in mainstream news reporting. It's at every holiday party you probably went to.
Oh, I get asked a million questions all the time.
Right.
As I'm sure you do too.
And
Look,
there's no age limit. Like people in their 80s will ask me questions about AI.
I was just
People in
going
their
to say,
20s will ask me questions
your
about
mother,
AI.
your mother asked you questions, and my mother asked me questions,
Absolutely.
and they're both in their 80s asking
Absolutely.
questions.
And they're
always amused.
they're both fascinated by it. They're both learning about it. They're both experimenting with it. It's wild. It's out there.
Oh, it's wild. And I love when I get the phone call. Are you watching this on TV? Check this out.
Yeah.
And then a couple of years ago, we're starting to hear a lot about AI and AI in the enterprise. And there was a lot of conversation about, why isn't AI really penetrating the enterprise? What are we missing? And it seemed like what I had seen before, which was that a lot of it was tied up in the tech world. So you had this chat interface that was the primary way people would use it, and you would use this chat interface to chat with a PhD brain, artificial intelligence, and the people who spent their lives doing that mostly were people who wrote code. Your code doesn't work. You go to your PhD CTO and say, hey, fix my code.
Right.
And now you have a machine do it. Great. The rest of us in the company, that's not how we do our jobs. My marketing person does not chat with PhDs all day long for suggestions on what she should do. So it seemed like we needed a way, once again, to bring the connectivity out of the sort of the back office, the data center, and bring that as something that humans could use with AI to actually accomplish things that, using the tools that they use, using Salesforce, using Box,
Right.
using all these different tools. And so we started Barn Door to make that a reality.
Really interesting. I think one of the things that's interesting to me too is that you were around for the API era and you saw some challenges and problems there, and you started a company to try to address those.
Yeah.
It has always stuck with me that APIs in the late 2000s, there were a lot of articles about how every business leader needed to understand the API era and what was going to happen. And in a lot of ways, that never really happened.
No.
It didn't come to fruition. APIs were very useful, still are very useful.
Still are very useful.
They're a fundamental piece of technical architecture, but they're really viewed as a technology component today.
Yes.
They never really penetrated the business psyche.
Yeah, I think it's true. And part of it was there was a part of the hype cycle for APIs where the idea was you open an API and this army of hundreds of thousands of developers out there would build things on your thing, right? And that was all the rage. And we had this huge developer network. We had 250,000 developers that were signed up. It was great. And that happens sometimes. But really the value was large company X has APIs, large company Y, they do a partnership together. They're able to, you have Citibank, you walk into a Best Buy, you use your Citibank reward card and you walk out with a TV set, right? The behind the scenes of that was where APIs were really making money.
Right.
And so the hype of it, we used to have this conference and we have to sort of explain to people what APIs were and how do you spell it. I mean, it really was tough. Fortunately, AI, at least people mostly think they know what it is. Right. And there's still a lot of figuring out what to do with it. You're at the point now where you sort of see human processes and you are automating those. That's lovely, but that's not really where the value is going to be created. The value is created by doing things humans can't do, not just having faster horses.